All right, I'm going to do a series of videos on bearing on my book, Political Aesthetics, which is forthcoming in 2010. It's got a number of case studies in it, and this first series of videos will be on what I call black nationalist aesthetics, the intertwined radical political movement of black nationalism with religious developments, connected religious developments such as rastafarianism in Jamaica and subsequently all over the world, the Nation of Islam, and related American black nationalist religious developments such as the Nation of Gods and Earths, as well as the aesthetic developments of reggae and hip-hop music. Now, these things, in my view, are inseparable from one another. They have to be understood as a coherent system: political, religious, and aesthetic. And the basic view of political aesthetics, the book, is that political systems are not only texts or sets of doctrines, but are aesthetic environments, design environments, encompassing architecture, costume, music, and so on. And if you want to understand a political system, you have to understand it in terms of its aesthetic embodiments. And I think this development I'm going to describe in terms of black nationalism is an excellent example of that. Now, in discussing black nationalism, you have to start with, I think, Marcus Garvey. Although the idea of nationalism, you could find it, for example, in W.E.B. Du Bois, the idea of racial nationalism, which developed probably out of German thought about nationalism, is that each race has a particular character and destiny in world history. Races are actors, or perhaps the central actors, in world history, according to this kind of racialism or race nationalism. And each race has a role to play in this development. Now, that was a white racist position when it was developed by people like Gobineau in the 19th century. But obviously it has the possibility of turning around the other way and indicating that black folks, like white folks, or red folks, or yellow folks, have a glorious historical destiny. Now, a number of people, including people like Jefferson and Lincoln, had suggested that black people in the United States should return to Africa. The Republic of Liberia was set up for repatriated slaves. And that was kind of a racist movement, but on the other hand, throughout the history of the black diaspora, you've had repatriation movements, or you might call it like the idea of black Zionism, returning to a promised land from which you had been evicted. And that is, central to Marcus Garvey's racial nationalism. Now, Garvey was born in 1887 in St. Anne's, Jamaica, same place that produced Bob Marley. He was primarily a printer by profession, and started printing, radical nationalist literature in Panama, where he was working, as many Jamaicans did, and then in Harlem, USA, where he founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or UNIA, in the teens and 20s. This was the biggest mass movement of black people in the diaspora up until that time. And not only in the United States, but throughout the United States, in the Caribbean, Central America, parts of South America, wherever you find black folks in Europe, and even in Africa, there were followers of Garvey. Garvey's was a political aesthetics of genius. The street parade, the festival, The costuming was people found it incredibly powerful. And the idea of repatriation to Africa as a redemption of the black race and a realization of their glorious destiny was something, again, that captured the imagination of many people. Now, a follower of Garvey, who probably knew him in Harlem, also born in Jamaica, but probably knew him in Harlem and certainly knew him after Garvey was deported for tax evasion because of a vendetta of the FBI against him, really a political prosecution, was deported to Jamaica, and Leonard Howell, who had probably known Garvey in Harlem, certainly knew him in Jamaica, as I say, and started preaching a religious Garveyism. Now, Garvey himself had been raised as a Catholic, and the UNIA was always sort of vaguely Christian, but many people started to draw black nationalist religious conclusions from Garvey's teaching, although Garvey was hesitant to do that. So there were some amazing radical religious developments in the 30s and 40s stemming from the Garvey movement, like, for example, expressed in the Royal Parchment Scroll of Black Supremacy and other wild black nationalist scriptures. Well, Leonard Howell took something that Garvey had said, that there would be that a black king would arise in Africa and call his children home. Now, Garvey may have meant by that himself. He appointed himself provisional president of Africa. Howell took it to mean the Emperor Haile Selassie, who was coronated in 1930. By 1932, Leonard Howell was preaching on the streets of Kingston and handing out pictures of Selassie, calling Garvey a kind of John the Baptist figure, and Selassie, that is Rastafari, that's his name before he was crowned, calling him the Messiah, or indeed God incarnate, Jah Rastafari. That's in 1932, and that's the beginning of Rastafarianism. Rastafarianism teaches, it's an apocalyptic religion, teaches that the end is nigh. You can see that theme in much reggae music. It's a racialist religion. It teaches a special destiny of black people. It's an immanentalist religion, which means that it teaches that if you know what life is worth, you will look for yours on earth. That redemption comes not after death in a pie in the sky, but here, now, through social action. Right? Now, the Rastas eventually settled in a rural compound above Kingston called the Pinnacle, where they started to practice their dietary restrictions known as ital, started using ganja as a sacrament as well as a cash crop, started growing dreadlocks, perhaps modeling themselves after Eastern holy men or Indian holy men, etc. And the Pinnacle itself was raided many times and finally broken up as Howell was sent to a mental institution as a political prisoner. And the Rastas spread throughout Jamaica, especially in the ghettos of Kingston. And that is, among other things, the origin of reggae music. More later.